On this episode of Technicolor Blood, Eliza Dushku speaks, and Steve Carell is the hero we didn't know we needed.
Oh, well, I'm excited about that. Turns out Aquaman is the hero China needed.
Here we go. Technicolor Blood starts right now. Technicolor Blood, we are back, people. My name's Chris. I'm here, as always, with Terrence. Terrence, how are you today?
Doing pretty good. Looking forward to Christmas. It's right around the corner.
Right around the corner. Well, we always start with movies or shows that we've recently watched, and I will say once again, I've proven useless, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I saw some things. I watched some things. I witnessed some things. None of them were worth talking about. No. These were bad decisions by me.
Okay. But they were definitely your fault, is what you're telling us? They weren't forced on you by somebody else?
No, this is on me. Oh, okay. I have veto power in my own home, so no, this is really just about me not drawing a line in the sand. So
all right, fair enough. I did see something that I think is worth talking about. I was able to catch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Uh-huh.
You know, that's a popular movie right now, and I can see why. I really, really enjoyed the film.
All right, glad to hear that. I've heard nothing but good things about it.
Yeah, and I think it deserves every bit of that. I would say this is the most fun I've had at a superhero movie in many, many years. It's the most fun I've had with the Spider-Man character since probably Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2.
Wow.
Their take on Spider-Man, and you, as you can kind of tell from the trailers, you get to see many Spider-Men, but chief among them, you do get Peter Parker, and you get the introduction of Miles Morales, who is kind of the Spider-Man for a younger generation. You know, Marvel introduced him several years ago. He's the first biracial superhero kind of in comic books, and real popular with kids. And this is the first time we've seen him in a movie, and man, he just steals the show. He's really, really entertaining. The film feels like the first half of the Tom Holland Spider-Man, Spider-Man Homecoming, the kind of where he's just like a teenager discovering his powers with his friends.
Which you were a big fan of the first part of that movie. Yeah,
the first half I thought was great. Right. And then the second half just turns into generic Marvel movie. This doesn't really fall into that trap. I would say this movie is rock solid up until the last 10 minutes.
Oh no.
And it doesn't even really fall apart. There's an emotional climax to the movie, and then the action climax goes for another 10 minutes. So you've kind of already hit the point in the movie where it's peaked, and then they just drag it out for 10 more minutes of beat 'em up.
Okay.
It's a small price to pay.
Right.
I wouldn't knock a star off of it or anything for
Minor
that.
complaint.
Yeah. Overall, though, great movie. The casting is just spot on. I really can't say enough about all of them. The guy who plays lead is Shameik Moore. He was the lead in Dope.
Okay.
He's also been on a show that I can't remember the name of right now, but I was totally unaware of. So I don't know if it's a streaming service show or what. But he's kind of shocking because he's so good at playing the teenage Spider-Man that I just assumed he was a real young guy himself. So when I actually looked him up and realized that he was quite a bit older than the character that he's playing or that he's voicing in this film, I was kind of blown away by it. Like he captures that age just so perfectly. Like he really is just a standout in that performance that he brings. And then the Peter Parker Spider-Man, who kind of plays his mentor in the movie, is voiced by an actor named Jake Johnson, which you may or may not know from his name. But if not, and there's no reason that you really should, he's the ultimate that guy.
Okay.
Like if you saw a picture of him, you would instantly be like, oh yeah, that guy. I've seen him in some stuff. But you wouldn't be able to tell me what that stuff was. His most famous role is, I guess he was the boyfriend on that series, The New Girl, that Zooey Deschanel starred in 10 years ago or whatever. He's been in several big movies since and kind of supporting roles along the way. He was apparently in one of the Jurassic World movies. I can't for the life of me remember him in it. But anyway, his take on Peter Parker is just excellent. Like he just nails the particular version of that character they were going with, like just right on the money.
Okay.
So really great movie. A lot's been made of the visual aspects of it, and it is visually fascinating to look at. Like it's an animation style that we've never seen before.
Right.
It's very hip. It's very different, but different in a good way. Everything about it is fascinating. The soundtrack, I know that you have been tipped to. It's, whether or not the music in it is your thing or not, it fits the tone of this movie perfectly.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it just syncs with the vibe that they're going for. Really, I guess what it boils down to is everything about this movie clicks the right way. And as a result of that, man, I would definitely encourage anyone who has any interest in superhero movies at all, check this out. Don't relegate it to a backbench because it's animated, because I guarantee you it's as good as the best Marvel movies have been so far.
Wow, that is pretty high praise. So and obviously clearly worth seeing on the big screen as well.
Yeah, I would say once this animation style has been trotted out in, other films or whatever, and it'll just become another way to animate a movie or whatever. But for right now, when no one's ever seen it before, I mean, it's pretty visually dynamic. I would definitely say it's worth catching on the big screen if you can.
Huh, interesting.
And the sound for it. I mean, the soundtrack, the sound design, the voice acting, like all of it benefits from like the immersive experience of a theater.
So I don't know much about it other than I was excited to see it when I had seen sort of the trailers for it and some of the discussion about it from friends of mine who are movie fans, Spider-Man fans, comic book movie fans. Is it one of those things where it's sort of like several vignettes of different people playing Spider-Man? Do the storylines all intertwine?
Yeah, so it's not vignettes. It's, as the name kind of suggests, Into the Spider-Verse, there's an event that happens that like cracks open a doorway, and the conceit is that there are like multiple parallel universes, and everyone has their own version of Spider-Man. And so a bunch of those Spider-Man characters converge into the Miles Morales, universe. And so that's how we get to meet these other Spider-Man. One of them's voiced by Nicolas Cage.
Right.
Spider-Gwen character is voiced by Haley Steinfeld. She's the star of the new Bumblebee movie.
Okay.
So she's having quite a year. All of them are great. All of them are terrific.
I think that show you mentioned earlier was The Get Down, which was a Netflix show.
Okay, yeah,
which was
I'd never
fairly popular. I haven't seen it, but it was fairly popular.
Yeah, and I will say I don't know anything about these other Spider-Man characters. I don't know anything about the Spider-Verse or anything. All of it was new to me, and the movie just does a fantastic job of introducing it to you. In fact, I thought the tightrope, if you can call it that the producers walked, that they nailed the best is it. If you're a fan, if you're from the younger generation and you're a fan of Miles Morales, if he's your Spider-Man, I mean, this movie is perfect. Like, it is just exactly everything you could hope for. If you're like a stodgy, older, grumpy comic book guy and Peter Parker is your Spider-Man and you don't know about these kids and whatever,
right?
The way they bring him into the story and the fresh take on him, it's perfect. Like, it just works. Like, no matter who you favor as Spider-Man, this movie serves your purposes. And I thought that was just a real stroke of brilliance on the part of these producers. I can't imagine there being some group of grumpy internet fans outraged about how this movie was done. I'm sure it's there.
Of course it is.
I'm sure they're
the
angry
purists.
White guys who are frustrated that there's a non-white Spider-Man, but they've got bigger problems than comic books. I'm just saying, for this movie, it just a great job. Kudos to the producers for handling that.
Wow. Well, I'm even more excited to see it now. And this basically, we should just rename this segment "Movies That Chris Really Wants to See That Terrence Gets to First." All right, appreciate that. We'll review there. I think really you couldn't have done it more of a service in the way you reviewed it. Just even without spoilers, it just sounds like it has mass appeal to anyone who, like you said, just isn't already completely set in what they already believe in the character. And anyone who's closed-minded may not enjoy it, but anyone who is on the other side of that might have a great time.
Yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, with the holidays coming in, your kids are out of school. If you're a parent and your kids want to see this movie, you should go with them to watch it. Like, it's really entertaining. You get a kick out of it. And I mean, in the most clever and subtle way, it's actually full of like some great morals for like kids. It's like a teenager dealing with all this teenagery stuff with his school and his parents. Like, they've really created like a a complex dynamic to drop the main character in, and none of it is preachy, none of it is like tacked onto the story. It's all really woven in really well. I feel like we started to notice that like studios take a little extra time when they're making their animated movies, and their scripts are often more layered, especially the ones that are aimed at kids than the live action versions are.
Right.
And I think this movie is a case in point of that. And you know, it's really great for kids.
Great. Well, I'm even more excited to check it out, and I will certainly do that coming up soon. All right, we'll come back and talk about some movie news. All right, let's talk about some movie news. So, for months now, we've speculated about whoever is going to end up taking over Guardians of the Galaxy 3 after James Gunn was jettisoned. Still, no name has surfaced as far as someone who they've settled on. But it says here that Marvel actually did approach Adam McKay to direct the third Guardians movie. And the article I read, it was sort of strange because it didn't really give me a good sense of why he actually turned it down, which is a little bit odd on the writer's part. But I guess it sort of fits in the tone with the direction you think they want to go with that. They grab someone who obviously has a ton of, experience with comedies. He did Step Brothers and several other movies of that ilk, and he's got Vice coming out soon, which is a drama. He's
probably most famous for maybe the newscaster movie.
Anchorman, right?
Anchorman, yeah.
Right, sorry, yeah. Yeah, so
I went with newscaster instead of Anchorman.
That famous newscaster. All right, yeah, so I can see that him being a guy they approach. They also talked about him doing Inhumans for Marvel, which I'm not overly familiar with that property, but that apparently has fizzled as well. So again, they're kicking around names, but still nothing has come into focus. And it's just so strange to me that this massive property that's sitting there waiting to be made is just going to be continuing to be put off. I mean, I think last we heard it was going to be 2021, maybe 22.
Right.
And they still don't have a director. And I just can't understand why they haven't gotten this fixed.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that complicated to me.
So, I mean, like you said, I guess the one thing that we can sort of glean from them at least chasing down Adam McKay is that they definitely want to keep pushing the comedic aspect of it, maybe even in a greater direction than the previous two installments had been.
Yeah, and again, though, since they're going to use James Gunn's script, I wonder if this comes down to, I don't want to say an ego thing, but I'm sure Adam McKay would have been happy to direct the movie, but if he's not going to be able to have control of the script, then I hesitate to say why would he, because it's such a huge property, but he's already a pretty big established director. So
yeah. I also have to wonder, in reality, Hollywood's a pretty small community. So I wonder if there are directors who are going to pass on this project because they don't feel James Gunn was treated well by Disney. I don't know. It would be interesting to know if one of them would ever come forward and say something along those lines.
Yeah, that whole situation just continues to be very perplexing to me. When something is right there for the taking and you're guaranteed to make a mint out of it, Hollywood, which, as we've discussed many times, as every other business, is there to make a boatload of cash. I just don't understand how they can't get that fixed.
And, and the reality is Disney has to, like, all their Marvel movies have to be shot in a certain order because they have to be released in a certain order because they've planned out ahead of time how they all work together and which pieces fall where.
Right.
So they've got a window that they have to get this film made in. Like, they've already pushed it back. So obviously they're going to have to make some concessions to the greater scheme that they had in mind. But at some point they have to pull the trigger on making this movie, or else, it falls out of alignment, and whatever was going to happen in it will happen in a different movie. And then where do you plug it back in?
Yeah.
If you can even plug it back in, because, so many things involve characters doing a thing in one movie that affects what they do in the next movie. Yeah. I'm just curious to know how desperate they're going to become at some point to just get the movie made. Like, just throw anyone into the slot of director just to get it done.
Do you think Marvel even pays attention to what's going on with DC movies, or do you think they just exist in their own sphere? I ask that because I wonder if, let's say Aquaman is sort of, I guess to us it would be unexpected if it was a massive hit. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what your feel is for how well it'll do box office wise. I'm sure it'll do fine.
I have a news update on that.
Okay, well, we'll get to that. But do you think if, let's say Aquaman is a bigger hit than the industry expected it to be, and qualifies maybe as a huge hit. Do you think that would actually make Marvel kind of light a fire under their asses and get it done a little bit quicker? Because maybe there's some actual competition coming for a change?
I mean, that's a great question. I can't imagine that they would at this point. That just doesn't seem, I don't know. They're so far ahead of Warner Brothers. Like, I don't even know if they can see that studio in their rearview mirror at this point.
Yeah. All right, well, that seems like a good transition if you want to talk about your Aquaman update.
Okay, well, yeah, so that does transition pretty perfectly. The numbers are in for Aquaman in China right now. If you remember, it was released internationally before it was released here in North America. And just in China alone, it's made about $210 million. That makes it the highest grossing Warner Brothers picture ever in China. Those are some pretty big numbers. That's... I mean, I don't know. That seems unexpected to me that movie, that of all the superhero movies would be the one that like really connected with Chinese audiences.
Yeah.
On top of that, if you add in all of the international takes so far, it's over $330 million. So this is a movie that had, I want to say something like a $160 million budget.
Really? That's it?
Yeah. And so internationally, it's already made double that budget,
right.
Meaning like it's now at the point where it's broke even.
Right.
So anything it makes domestically or in addition to what it's made so far is just pure profit for them.
Interesting.
It has just now been released in the United States. It's made in its opening weekend $70 million. It was projected to make in the early days when it was originally tested and it didn't test too well. They set expectations at about $50 to $60 million. So it's already performing better than the expectations were. And projections are that by the end of the long extended Christmas holiday weekend,
right.
So it opened on Friday, Christmas is on Tuesday. If you take that entire window of time together, it's expected to make about $120 million in the US.
Which, I mean, is pretty good considering how packed the slate is right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's super packed. There's so much competition in the box office at the moment.
Yeah. So after all of this, we've been talking about Aquaman for months in one way or the other, usually not in a very good way because it just doesn't look good to either one of us. I mean, where are you on the movie? I mean, I know you want to see it. I know you want to see it because it's an event movie and we do the show and it's a comic book movie. We always see the big event movies regardless of how bad they look.
Yeah.
Do you actually want to see it early in its run, or is it one of those things where you're just like, hey, if I catch it, I catch it?
The trailer does nothing for me. It doesn't look particularly good. The two caveats to that are it's clearly performing really, really well.
Right.
Audiences are enjoying it. That's intriguing to me. And I'm a big fan of Jason Momoa. Like we talked about last week, that guy just has charisma for days.
Yep.
So, I mean, I want to see what he does with this role. Now that he's got the chance to be the star as Aquaman, I expect that he's just going to own it.
Sort of related, but not really related to that. I saw an article where the official HBO Asia Time Warner owned Twitter account actually retweeted out the strange online meme of Zack Snyder fans demanding that the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League be released. And while I normally just ignore that stuff, we did a whole segment praising Jason Momoa last week.
Yes.
and this hasn't changed at all because Jason's intentions here are good. He is a massive Zack Snyder fan. He outwardly realizes and publicly discusses how he would not have the career he has if it wasn't for Zack Snyder. So he has a tremendous amount of loyalty to Snyder, which I totally get. And it's actually a very endearing thing about Jason Momoa that he literally has like gotten with Snyder and like at press events and whispered in his ear, like, I would have nothing if it wasn't for you. Like he's that kind of guy.
Yeah. Which
again, just makes Jason Momoa even more of a great guy. But he also is on this train about wanting this Justice League cut to be released. And I'm just so sick of seeing this meme to the point where now I want it to come out. I want it to come out so I can see it and we can devote an hour-long special to it.
Yeah, listen, I mean, longtime listeners know neither you or I are fans of Zack Snyder. I couldn't care less about seeing his cut of Justice League or seeing him ever direct another superhero movie ever again. But I do understand the interest in his cut of Justice League because the version of the film we got was an abomination.
Sure.
That hacked together garbage amalgam of Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon trying to come in and mop up the mess that was left over.
Yeah.
It was a terrible movie. None of it worked. I appreciate the fact that there are people who are saying, listen, if there was enough footage shot by Snyder to have a cohesive and coherent movie, let's see what that looked like.
Absolutely.
I understand that. I personally don't care, but I get the kind of fascination that some people in the audience have for it.
I have no doubt that it'll be better than the Justice League movie we saw.
Dare to dream.
But the ceiling on that is still
Yeah.
at floor level, at least for me. At least for, I guess, we both sort of feel that way. So
Yeah, and I feel like kind of most people acknowledge that it's just, you know, if you're a diehard DC Comics fan, you just want this stuff to be better than it is.
yeah, of course. And, you know, I think we all, as we discussed before, we want these movies to be good so that there's more competition for Marvel and they, you know, iron sharpens iron kind of thing.
Sure.
All right, so let's pick up on another story, completely unrelated to something we discussed last week, the whole Eliza Dushku saga at CBS and Bull, where she was fired. You guys, I'm sure, already know the history between that. So she's broken her silence.
Well, let's just touch on it just in case.
Okay, sure.
So
she was on the show Bull on CBS, a big hit for them, and she had a 3-episode arc that could turn into, I think, a full-time role on the show. She was harassed verbally, I guess you would say, by Michael Weatherly, the star of the show,
in a sexual way.
Yeah, she said there were what Michael Weatherly phrased as rape jokes and threesome jokes. He called them jokes, so we don't really know what was said there. And Eliza Dushku got a $9.5 million payment from CBS that was personally overseen by Les Moonves, who has his own issues. In essence, to both get her off the show and to buy her silence. And there's really no other way to put it. And there was a confidentiality agreement attached to that. And the article that I'm reading now that has an update on this is actually it's from CNN Entertainment. So, you know, it's at least a website we've heard of. It's not just some thing thrown up there from some website we've never heard of. But the article basically says that Eliza changed her mind about breaking her silence because of the fact that there were some things getting out there that she thought weren't true. What the article does not specify is that you can't just change your mind when you have an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, because it voids the contract. That's the whole point of those things being in there. But there's nothing in there about how this cost her money. So I don't know if there's some other legal thing going on. I think I brought this up last time, because there's so much stuff going on with Les Moonves that those things were disclosed. And so maybe this becomes something that can be disclosed. On the legal side of it, I have no idea. But she basically came back and said that, you know, they're sort of wiping this a little bit too clean. Like it was a little bit worse than they had originally put out, which is not a surprise. I think we sort of all got that impression.
Right.
And, you know, I think the bigger thing that's going to come out of this, once again, is they're not going to allow this thing to sort of go away and the show just to keep on going. Because now that it's out there and now that Eliza has stepped up and made a statement, I'm sure at this point now we're going to see what the actual future of that show is. I don't watch the show. I don't know the show, but it's obviously a huge hit for them. But
yeah, they were willing to just cut a check for $10 million to keep the show rolling along like it always had been. So it must be making them a lot of money.
Yeah. So she basically came out and said, you know, the boys club is still in full force at CBS. There were constant stories apparently from Eliza released her part of her statement was that Michael Weatherly was constantly bragging about how close he was to Les Moonves and how he would hop on the private plane with him and they vacationed together and they were great friends. And he basically said that Dushku basically said that Michael Weatherly sort of wielded the relationship as a bit of a weapon and a bit of a threat when he started sensing that she was having issues with the way that she was reacting to what he was saying.
Right.
So this part was kind of never talked about the first time. This
is all new.
Yeah, she brought up sort of the allegations and Michael Weatherly dismissed them. Oh, they're jokes, no big deal. But I see what I did. It was wrong and blah, 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 and I apologize. So he did all that. But he left out the part about how he sort of wielded his relationship with Les Moonves as a bit of a weapon against her. So it sounds like this is another thing where there's just going to be more and more news coming out about this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like it's going to get swept under the rug because every week or every couple of days it seems like there's a new update. So we'll see.
I don't feel like this ends well for anybody involved in it.
Right. And it's such a big hit for them. It'll be real interesting to see now that some of this stuff is getting put in the light. CBS is going to have to make that decision between this massive hit show and, you know, do we want to give people the impression that we're okay with this? Because they've kind of already done that with the payment.
Right. Yeah.
So if they have any hope at all about maybe pulling some of that back, now would probably be the time to start addressing it. So,
Yeah.
All right. So one other thing I wanted to bring up real quick, Steve Carell.
All right. Steve Carell. Everyone loves Steve Carell.
Yeah, everyone loves Steve Carell. Obviously, The Office. He's got his new Dolly movie coming out that I'm just not even going to mention the name of.
Welcome to Marwin.
Yes. And this is not about that.
Okay.
Here's why Steve Carell is the hero we didn't realize we knew. Steve Carell wants to save American filmmakers and showrunners from themselves. Of course, he's been pressured and asked many, many, many times about doing an Office revisit or reboot. And I didn't really know this. I know that he'd been sort of averse to it, but he flat out is just like, no, there's no situation where I'm going to do this. And I think most people hear that and they think, bit of a dick.
Yeah.
I mean, even when he was on Saturday Night Live recently, they did a whole thing in the opening segment where several cast members of The Office showed up and they badgered him about doing a reunion. And he just sort of left it open, which I thought was a little bit interesting to even leave the door cracked like that. But he's come out and said, no, I don't have any interest in doing it. We need to leave things well enough alone. He said, basically, we'd have to get every single person back. The writers, all of the same directors, everyone would have to 100% be coming back on this. And he doesn't have any interest in doing it. But the larger point he was making is that this was a great, wonderful thing. It was amazing. The show is actually more popular now than it was then, is what he said. And that's actually sort of reflected in the fact that it's actually the #1 most streamed show on Netflix.
Wow.
Which is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
with all their original content and all their Marvel stuff, The Office is the #1 stream show on Netflix. So he's just laying down the law saying, look, I'm not interested in doing this. And I know part of that is also because he's wildly successful. He doesn't need the money. I'm sure there's some actors on that show that would just kill to come back on it. But I applaud Steve Carell for this. I thought the show was great. You know, as usual with American TV, after several good seasons, it started completely coming apart.
Yeah.
But I respect and admire his feelings on this, and I really hope he sticks to his guns.
Yeah, I agree. I don't go back to the well. It never works out. Just keep moving forward.
Yes, you have something that exists on its own so well, and it's so popular. It's one of the most popular television shows in American history. Just leave it alone. And and this isn't so much about The Office. This is about, in general, as a whole, the remakes and the reboots and the revisits. And I respect his line in the sand, and I just really hope he sticks with it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, we'll come back with some development news. Just a little bit of light development news this week. And this really also just sort of goes to our previous discussions about Netflix. Guillermo del Toro has a project with Netflix upcoming where he's going to do his version of Pinocchio. And if you know Guillermo del Toro's work, you are not at all surprised to learn that he wants to do Pinocchio.
No, that does not sound like a surprise at all.
Yes, that is what you would call his thematic wheelhouse for sure. So yeah, he's doing Pinocchio for Netflix. I believe it's live action. I'm not 100% sure about that because it's still early in development. But really, I'm bridging that discussion into a greater point, which is Netflix once again coming to the aid of a filmmaker who's established and is a big name. He's an Academy Award winner. And financing his picture the way he wants to have it done. So now, in recent memory anyway, we have 3 examples of this. And I just feel like the studios, I'm not going to say they're behind on this, but I just feel like if they want to stop the torrent of what looks like the inevitable, wave of Netflix being able to finance all these legendary filmmakers and get these movies made, then they might want to start rethinking some of this because... So Guillermo del Toro has been wanting to get Pinocchio done. He's been running around Hollywood, he says, for 10 years, and no one wants to make it. Netflix said, here you go, let's make it. We talked about Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro have that film, The Irishman, which is a mob movie, and they tried to get that movie set up for several years all around Hollywood. They couldn't get anyone to do it the exact way they wanted it to be done. Netflix said, here you go. They made the movie they wanted to make. 2 legendary Academy Award winning directors right there.
Yeah.
And more recently, Alfonso Cuarón, Academy Award winner, possibly our favorite current working director right now. He wanted to make Roma, and he took it around all the studios in Hollywood. And despite the fact that he is maybe the biggest deal going in critical filmmaking right now, and you know, quality artistic filmmaking, everyone said no. He went to Netflix, and Netflix said, here you go. So, I mean, this isn't even being done like on a trial basis by, like, you know, directors you've never heard of. These are Academy Award winning legendary directors, and not has-beens. I mean, Scorsese, I guess, you know, his prime is behind him, but Del Toro and Cuarón have won 2 of the last 3 Oscars.
Yes. Right.
I think maybe the last 2 Oscars.
Yeah.
So for best director, and you know, it just blows me away that no one else would make these movies with them, because I don't know. I feel like Netflix understands. I don't want to say they understand, but they at least seem like they understand with these legendary directors. They'll write them a check and just go make the movie you want.
Yeah.
You know, don't try to get overly involved with it like maybe a studio would. Mm-hmm. And they seem to have that figured out. And I guess the trade-off for these big time filmmakers is, well, I want my movie to be on the big screen. Well, clearly they made an exception for Roma, and they'll continue to do that, I'm sure, for any legendary director that wants to work with him. Is just going to say, yeah, but we at least need a month-long run, and Netflix will be like, sure, whatever.
Right.
So I'm sort of confused as to why the studios aren't sort of seeing this coming.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess it kind of leads to the question of, where does Netflix get its freedom from? Is it because they don't have to put together a slate of release dates? Mm-hmm. You know, they can release anything they want, anytime they want. They're not beholden to locking in a weekend where they need to make all of their money back all at once, mm-hmm. or else it's a financial disaster for them. Whereas the actual traditional studios kind of do. So as a result of that, they have to be far more protective of what they're going to make and when they're going to make it. Mm-hmm. Do you think is that the wild card that Netflix has that allows them to be able to just drop these checks on these big name directors and say, just go do it the way you want to do it?
I mean, I don't know if you have just put more thought into it than they even have, because like we talked about, Netflix is basically a movie making credit card right now. They're not.
It is.
No one knows how they're making money.
Yeah,
they're not making money.
Yeah.
They're spending on content. So I feel like it's just one of those things where they're all just like going in this car, 110 miles an hour down the highway, hanging out the windows, just throwing money at anyone who comes along, because the idea is, oh yeah, it's going to take 3 or 4 years, but this is going to be tremendously profitable soon, which is the same thing they said 3 or 4 years ago.
Sure. And
6 or 7 years before that. And They just keep going down this hill. So I feel like maybe it's a way for them to sort of establish their credibility for artistic endeavors, and not just like, oh, this is a streaming thing and Netflix, this is something you put on for your kids to watch or whatever. Or, this is just something you do on a Saturday night and you binge watch, with your wife or your girlfriend or your friends or whatever. And this seems like how they're culling out their space in like the artistic filmmaking area, where they're just saying, yeah, we got Scorsese, we got Del Toro, we got Alfonso Cuarón. One I left out of the list earlier, the Coen brothers and Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Yeah. That's another one.
Yep.
So it's like they have their little division of Netflix that's just for their artistic endeavors, that's raising their profile. It's going to get them Oscar exposure. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's more of a strategy to it than that, but I just feel like it's just a part of this whole mentality of just like, they're writing blank checks to all these filmmakers, people we've never heard of, shows we've never heard of, grabbing properties from other countries and rebranding them. Mm-hmm. And then also, hey, let's start doing some of this with some of these legendary directors so we actually get some critical acclaim.
Yeah. And, as we've talked about, with each studio now setting up their own streaming service, are we going to start seeing this from all of those studios as well? Are they suddenly going to be, it's going to be hard for directors to make the movies they want if they want a theatrical release, but if they're willing to settle for that movie just going to that studio streaming service, mm-hmm. is it suddenly, here's a blank check, go enjoy yourself?
Yeah. And I mean, if and when does Netflix start buying up movie theater chains? They apparently can write a check for anything. Why wouldn't they spend some of that on actually having a theater chain that they could release this stuff to?
I mean,
if that's their idea.
if, as I was saying earlier, part of the problem that's holding studios back is the traditional distribution system of putting movies in theaters, maybe Netflix doesn't want to buy into that. Maybe they look at that and they're like, that's old and that's just more of a burden than it's worth to us. We have a better system.
Yeah, I feel like that was sort of the thinking with VCRs when movie rentals became a big thing. Everyone was like, oh God, movie theaters are going to die. And I just feel like that's always going to be a thing that people who otherwise can't find good ways to spend their time, that's just going to be a time killer, something they can go out and do all the time, you know? So I don't see that changing. So I wouldn't be surprised if Netflix invested in that. But at this point,
as I've said before, I think long before Netflix will buy a theater chain, they're going to buy an actual production studio.
Right. Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense for them to like cut all these checks that then go to traditional studios to actually create the content. Buy a studio, have a sound stage, have a production department, have the offices and the support staff that you need, and just do all of that in-house. Save yourself a ton of money.
So if and when that does happen, and I think it will, when Disney catches wind of that, will it just make them up their offer to acquire that company even more? It's going to become like a massive arms race,
right? Well, there are plenty of studios that are struggling right now, so now would be a great time for anyone to step in and do that.
All right, let's talk about some trailers.
Yes.
So we have a couple of trailers.
Boy, do we.
So these are a couple of titles that we've been kicking around the show for a while now. Let's start off with the first trailer for Men in Black International. This stars Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson from Thor Ragnarok fame. And I was spectacularly underwhelmed by that trailer.
Yeah, I was too. The two observations that I had about it right off the bat were, one, it's no kind of reboot or anything. It is 100% faithful to the movies that had come before. Like, it's just a new sequel with new stars.
Yeah.
But it looks the same. It sounds the same.
Weapons have the same, kitschy design.
Yeah, it's not a reboot in any way. It's a straight sequel. And then the other point that I had was it's just really doesn't look entertaining. You've got Chris Hemsworth, who has proven to be comedy dynamite, and he doesn't even get the most screen time in the trailer. He's just like kind of dropped in here and there to like say something stupid, and I don't know. It seems like the movie they made might have been a little bit misaligned. I don't know. Hard to tell from first trailer, but I am in no way excited about this.
Yeah, I feel like the humorous moments with Hemsworth in the trailer just were moments where, I don't know, the writers or the director doesn't really understand why he's funny for the reasons he's funny. Yeah, if that makes sense. It's very strange to me. It actually kind of reminds me of one of my big criticisms of the first Jurassic World movie. You have Chris Pratt, who's obviously very funny, and then when you watch the movie, I feel like they didn't use that enough. Like he was just the kind of humor that was involved with this character wasn't the kind of humor that he's really good at, and that's kind of how I felt about this with Chris Hemsworth as well. Yeah. So this is directed by F. Gary Gray, who did most recently he did The Fate of the Furious. He also did that Straight Outta Compton movie a few years back. He's got a handful of hits on his filmography. He did The Italian Job way back when. His debut was Friday. So who knows how this will end up, but I was just very underwhelmed, and like I said, Hemsworth suddenly seems weirdly miscast to me. When I heard that he was going to be cast in the role, I thought, oh, that's a great idea. And now that I actually see it in action, I'm just, I don't know. Probably one of those things we should wait until we actually see the movie, obviously, for final judgment. But the trailer did not get me excited, and that's the whole point of a trailer.
Yeah, it just feels like another forgettable Men in Black movie.
We shall see. All right, next one is the movie that no one knew they wanted or needed. The remake of HELLBOY. So HELLBOY was originally done very well by Guillermo del Toro, and it starred Ron Perlman, who was as perfectly cast as anyone possibly could ever be. Absolutely. In that role. And so we see the new HELLBOY trailer, and my immediate reaction to that trailer was, this looks pretty good for a Netflix series.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It does not look like a feature film to me.
Yeah, so First of all, I was shocked by how much it just looks like the previous Hellboy movies.
Yes.
Like it's a total reboot, right? They recast everything, different creative people behind it, and I was just blown away by how it doesn't look particularly different, other than it doesn't have any of the visual style of Guillermo del Toro.
Right.
It's just like you said, it's like they tried to adapt those movies to be a Netflix series done on a TV budget.
It looks like something that Guillermo del Toro would watch and say, I can make this better. You know,
Right.
it just seems backwards to me. And I guess another sort of, I mean, this is, I guess, a pretty severe criticism. Maybe you didn't notice it, but I felt like David Harbour's makeup just, I know that the character is sort of outlandishly not human.
Right.
But like when I saw Ron Perlman in that role and the costume design and the makeup, I believed he was Hellboy.
Yeah.
David Harbour's looks like makeup to me. Like his face looks kind of soft and squishy. Like I could just pull the makeup right off of him, which obviously is the case.
Right.
But I believed it when it was Ron Perlman. So it just looks, it looks cheap to me. It looks like I said, it looks like I would be super excited if it was a TV show.
Yeah.
The effects were kind of
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it boils down to being a textbook example of how you can take the exact same property with all of the elements essentially being the same. And if you have a really super talented director, it gets elevated. And if you don't, it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that trailer definitely is what it is.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we appreciate you listening as always. Have a great Christmas. Happy holidays. We will see you on the next one. If you want to shout at us, you can get to us on Twitter at TechBloodPod. And Terrence, Merry Christmas, I guess.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to all the listeners. I hope you guys take a moment to watch some Christmas movies and enjoy yourselves, and we'll talk to you next time.
We hope you have a great Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that. And we look forward to bigger and better things in 2019. This is a bad outro. Yeah, maybe we should just...
No, it's staying. Merry Christmas, everybody.
I blame Terrence for not fixing it. All right, guys, see you next time.